We don't often ascribe too much significance to the names of parshios. But this week's parsha actually has two different names. There are two different ways that it is referred to. Classically, most commonly known to us probably is Acharei Mos, but there are those, especially in Chabad, who refer to it simply as Acharei. What's the significance? Is there any significance? As with many minhagim in Klal Yisrael, sometimes there are subtle but deep messages that are tucked away in the simple practices that we have. I remember hearing the following in a conversation once with Rav Goldach Shlita, and he suggested something very, very interesting. Which of the two names would I have presumed would be the name of the parsha? On the one hand, most parshios are named for the first word at the beginning of the parsha, Bereshis. It's right at the beginning. It's the first word of significance in the parsha. And therefore, I would have thought that perhaps Acharei is the most proper way to refer to the parsha. But when you think about it, if it would be referred to as Acharei, it would be very, very broad. It would be almost like referring to Kisavo as Ki. Now you'll tell me there are other parshios that start with Ki, okay. But the Chaye, instead of Chaye Sarah, it's a bit too broad. So it seems to make sense that Acharei has to identify after what, and therefore we are told Acharei Mos, after the deaths of the Shnei B'nai Aaron. Acharei alone seemingly is meaningless. So how do we explain the minhag, the practice of referring to this parsha as Acharei? After what is the parsha being named? So our parsha contains within it the details of the service of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, the avodah of Yom Kippurim, and tasks that can be summarized as the holiest person going into the holiest place on earth on the holiest day of the year. To imagine the feelings of the Kohen Gadol, how elevated he felt on such a day after accomplishing, hopefully, kapara, atonement for all of Klal Yisrael, it boggles the mind. But then he needs to ask himself, what's next? What happens acharei? What happens after I leave the Kodesh HaKadoshim? What after I experience this tremendous spiritual high? What is the next step? The Lubavitcher Rebbe points out that the same idea in the language of the Rambam Hilchos Avodas Yom Kippurim. At the conclusion of the Avodah, it says, "V'lo ve'shbig de'atzmo ve'yotzei lebeis." So then he puts on his own clothes and he goes home. Why does the Rambam have to tell me that's a halacha? There's a halacha that he needs to go home afterwards. It would seem to be that's the natural progression. He did everything that he needs to do. He did everything that the Torah prescribes, everything that's necessary. Why does the Rambam have to tell us in his halachic work that he then puts on his weekday clothes and he goes home? And the answer seems to be the same idea. He needs to return home as the next step. It is the culmination in a certain sense of the avodah. Because after the avodah, the question is, what is next? What is the next thing he is going to do? How do you take it home together with yourself, with the Kohen Gadol? How does he take it with him? How does he pay it forward? And that is the challenge of our parsha. It's not just about the specific event, or after the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, or after whatever event it may be. The question in life is the critical one of acharei, of what is the next step. And I think it's so apropos that this parsha this year follows the Yom Tov of Pesach. Because when we go through the Yom Tovim, we're inspired, and especially the Yom Tov of Pesach, and especially in a year such as this, when we needed the Yom Tov of Pesach, and it comes on the heels of the tremendous miracles that we've seen, Am Yisrael being protected miraculously from the Iranians who were trying to wipe us off the face of the earth. Nisim, Geluyim, tremendous miracles. And the question that we keep asking ourselves is, okay, so what is the next step? What are we going to do? How do we build off of everything that we've experienced, after everything that we've been inspired in terms of seeing the Yad Hashem? How do we pay that forward? So yes, whichever name is ascribed to our parsha is very, very significant. Acharei Mos summarizes the parsha beautifully and similar to the other parshas that we have. But Acharei isn't too broad that it doesn't tell us anything. In fact, it's a question that we need to ask ourselves irrespective of what we call the parsha. After we've experienced the Pesach, as we're going through Sfiras Omer, Acharei Zeh, after all this, what are our next steps? How do we continue moving and bringing ourselves closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and hopefully closer to a Geula Shlema B'mheira V'yameinu Amen.